Good morning. Good morning. How's everybody doing this morning? Well, welcome. This is our chess class. If you've never been in one of my classes before, let me introduce myself. My name is Alex Cooper. I teach the computer classes at the Columbia County Library in Evans, the Harlem Library, which used to be the, um, the Harlem Library, the Uchee Creek Library that now is our Grovetown Library. That's who we're presented for today. And today we're doing our Chess 101. Now, definitely feel free to make any kind of posts or comments into our chat there. Do realize it is a little bit delayed there, so it may take me a minute or two to maybe answer your question, though. But it will get answered, I promise. And happy Thursday. How about that? So, the big question I always ask is, how can I help? Okay? So today is a pretty fun class, and hopefully you and your family members are staying safe and everything. And this is a great opportunity to learn a new kind of board game. Maybe you're bored with Monopoly, bored with a few other chess games. Checkers or something. You're thinking, let's do chess. We have that old chess board. Pull it out and let's learn how to play it. How about that? So as everybody kind of comes into the classroom and post a greeting and stuff and say hello. I'll talk about some of our other classes that we have going on. So on Tuesday, that's right, on Tuesday, we did photography basics and that video is still available. That's kind of our beginner class to using your camera, photography and everything. At 2:30, we talk about things like what's a megapixel and also using composition, rule of thirds, so you can take better photos. So that video is still up and available. On Wednesday, we've got gadget help going on, and we talked a lot about different topics. We also talked about the new Libby service that's coming to our library instead of the RB Digital for ebooks and audiobooks. In the future, we're going to do a class next week that focuses more about Libby when we do our big switch over on October 1st. Now, also yesterday, we did photography fundamentals and cloud backup. So definitely that's a great one to see. So it's kind of a series about photography. You're taking your pictures, click, click. You're putting them on the computer, switch, switch. And now you're backing them up to the cloud, float, float. How about that? And then, I kind of like that. That was pretty good. All right, so this morning, of course, we're doing our Chess 101. And then this afternoon, we're going to be doing part 3 to our camera photography. We're doing advanced photo editing, which is a lot of fun. We're going to be using a Photoshop-like software called GIMP, which is free. And it's a class that's really great. Come along. You can download the same files I'm going to be working with in the demonstration and everything. Follow along, and you too can learn how to do Photoshop like editing. This is a newer class. At the end, we've added layers to that, so we've got some fun stuff coming up. We'll learn how to change our teeth color, I'll also be able to change the background of something, and we'll also talk about recolorization and everything like that in our different layers. This is our schedule for the whole month. Wow, the whole month. That's right. And next Thursday is October 1st. Okay. So all these classes are still up and available on our YouTube channel. That's right, our YouTube channel. And next week we're going to be doing the photography printing and virtual scrapbooking class. Okay. And also on Wednesday we're going to be doing cord cutting basics at 11 a.m. And then at the 2:30, we're going to be doing creating videos and editing basics. And October 1st, that's right, October 1st, we're going to do Raspberry Pi projects with me, Alex. So I've got some neat little doodads we're going to start coding for our new little Raspberry Pi project. And then we've got our library resources and apps, and including the new Libby audiobooks and ebooks app. So we're going to be talking about that a whole bunch. That's the day we're supposed to switch over. On a little side note, our libraries are open with limited services and hours, no in-house programs, so that's why we're doing all our programs virtually. So please share our classes with others and let them know we're doing our classes virtually. We still have classes. Curbside holds pickup is available. You can go to gchrl.org for details or call the library with questions Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel. We have a goal of getting 100 YouTube subscribers, and if we do, we get our own YouTube address. So right now, the easiest way to find our YouTube channel is just search YouTube for GCHRL videos, and it will pull right up. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's get started talking about our chess. Chess. Today is chess. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I have 2 handouts for our chess, and I'm going to post those. In our chat. Here we go. So here's our main handout, and I'll kind of flip back and forth between that and our PowerPoint. There we go. And I'll be talking, and I also have little videos to share as well. So, it's loading. At least I think it's loading. There we are. Okay, so I got the handout, and I also got our PowerPoint as well. Need to make sure. All right, there we go. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's get started. Let's talk about why we want to learn about chess. Yay. Okay. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about the history, a game of planning and strategy. Smile Squad. The benefits of playing chess, sportsmanship, and chess etiquette. We'll talk about the game pieces and movement, how to set up a chessboard, special rules like en passant. Repeat after me. En passant. En passant. Then we'll talk about castling, our algebraic system of chess notation, strategies, and checkmate in 1 puzzles. Okay? So usually I'll tell you what we usually do in class when we do this. So usually our chess is broken up into 3 classes or 3 parts. We have a chess 1, which we kind of cover the basics. And near the end, then everybody can have about 30-45 minutes of play. So we have all the chessboards set up. Everybody's coming in so they can play other players, new players and stuff. And then we actually have a second class where we kind of delve more into our strategies and the algebraic notation and stuff. So that's like, and then we have practice again, 30 to 45 minutes or so. And then we actually have a chess tournament to try to get everybody ready. So we use our clocks, which we'll talk about that. So of course we're doing stuff virtual. We can't do a virtual tournament. I wish we could, but we can't. So of course we're doing it kind of all in one class, and then hopefully after this class you'll get to play the game yourself. Now, one of the things you could do is watch probably all the way down to getting into strategies. So once you learn en passant and castling, you basically could just start kind of playing a few rounds with friends or family member. And I encourage you to make sure that you tried to do the castling, and then pause the video and you could come back later and then learn more about some strategies, how to beat your opponent. But do realize these are home games, so it should be pretty fun, and just try to be positive. Or stay positive, I'll say that. Okay, in a minute I'll disappear, in case I'm blocking the view screen in any way. Let's talk about the history of the game of chess. The history of chess spans some 1,500 years. Chess traveled. The earliest version of the game originated in India before the 6th century AD. From India, the game spread to Persia. When the Arabs conquered Persia, chess was taken up by the Muslim world and subsequently spread to southern Europe. In Europe, chess evolved into its current form in the 15th century. Okay, so chess has been around, and it also means it has been around the world. How about that? The game as played during the early Middle Ages was slow, with many games lasting for days. Okay, some variations and rules began to change the shape of the game by 1300 AD. A notable but initially unpopular change was the ability for the pawn to move 2 places in the first move instead of 1. And a little bit, we're going to actually have a video with a chess master that's going to kind of explain that rule to us en passant. En passant. The queen and bishop remained relatively weak until between 1475 AD and 1500. In either Spain, Portugal, France, or Italy, the queen's and bishops' modern moves started and spread, making chess close to its modern form. In Europe, some of the pieces gradually got new names and or moves. Queens, bishops, pawn moving 2 spaces in its first move. This led to an en passant rule, a pawn placed so that it could have captured the enemy pawn if it had moved 1 square. Forward was allowed to capture it in the passing square. King jumped once. Let's see if I can move that down a little bit. There we go. King jumping once to make it quicker to put the king safe in a corner. This eventually led to castling. Okay. In the 1850s, modern chess tournament play began. First World Chess Championship was held in 1886. In the 1900s, the 1900s saw establishment of the World Chess Federation. 1970s, computers for analysis, first programmed chess game on the market. 1995's started online gaming appeared. Okay. A game of planning and strategy. It's considered a game of strategy and planning because during the game you plan to do certain strategies based on the positional elements of the pieces. These include pawn structure, king safety, piece placement, and mobility. However, the answer is not quite as simple as saying that chess involves strategy and planning. The thing to notice is that chess does not involve chance. So, maybe you've been at home. Maybe one of your favorite games is Monopoly. Okay, that's very possible. But realize that games like Monopoly or cards, well, we'll talk about that in a second. All your theoretical, if I can talk. All of your I'm going to skip that word for now. Possible next moves and your opponent's theoretical, thank you. Opponent's possible next moves that are known, defined, and visible to both players affects your strategy and planning. The further ahead your brain can plan, the stronger you can become as a player. Feels like I should have a little picture of a brain there because we talked about the brain. A player with better planning and strategy will always win. All right, I was about to talk about this. Some games depend on chance. Card games, you shuffle the deck, you put out the cards. You don't know what cards you may get. You have to roll with the cards you have in a positive way, and hopefully it works out. Board games like Monopoly, where the outcome depends partially on the dice roll. Big fan of Monopoly. My family's a big fan of Monopoly. Got to play Monopoly at some point, right? Even the Monopoly where they add the third dice changes up the play a little bit more. These games' luck will enable a player to win a game, even if his planning and strategy are not as good as his opponent's. This is not true for chess. So it really makes Monopoly kind of an all ages kind of game because you don't know what's going to happen because of the roll of the dice. This is not true for chess, as it says. Here's a short list of just some of the benefits of learning and playing chess. It provides practice at making accurate and fast decisions under pressure, drills skills that can help improve exam scores, improves reading, pattern recognition is enhanced, teaches sportsmanship, dealing with difficult choices, which is a tough one. Something's happened, you have to make a difficult choice very quickly. Making the best choice from a group of good choices teaches to learn from mistakes. Because remember, we don't have the dice roll, so it is all on you. Short list of some of the other benefits. Responsibility for actions, concentration is vigorously practiced. Logical reasoning is sharpened. Measurable individual accomplishments are enjoyed. Critical thinking, memory is enhanced, problem solving, and what if skills. Okay. Intellectual maturity is fostered. Belonging to a good group, self-esteem, mind enrichment, mental exercising, analyzing actions and consequences, the importance of planning. All right, so let's talk about our sportsmanship here a little bit. We've got our two folks there shaking hands. All right, so when you're playing a game, be polite and get off to a good start, okay? Don't boast, trash talk, or try to intimidate your opponent of any age. Don't argue with your opponent. Remember to focus back on the rules. Don't give or ask for advice. Now, you may try to give if you're trying to play as a friendly game with a family member, but if you're trying to beat them, and don't give them any advice, because if you did give them some advice and it led to them losing, then they may think that you maybe gave them that advice so that they would lose. Okay, so that's not fair, is it? Especially playing with somebody that is maybe less experienced than you. Don't be annoying. Don't trick your opponent. Don't try to trick your opponent by pretending to have made a bad move. Don't rush your opponent. After your game, be a good winner or loser. Classic things, we kind of do a shake hands thing. Saying check is not required, but is considered. So if your opponent's about to lose, and if they don't move their king, and in the next move, that means you could capture their king. Believe it or not, you do not have to say that they're in check, meaning you're about to capture their king in your next move. But it is considered polite, okay? But you don't have to do it. But most of them do. Here's our game pieces and movement. Let's talk about setting up our board. So I'm kind of imagining that you're at home. No. Kind of imagine you're at home and you pulled out a chessboard and you've set it in front of you. And now you have the pieces to pull out. So let's pull out the pieces and let's think about our game here. So first, in chess, how do I win? Okay. Checkmate or trap the opponent's king. Okay. How to start. The white side always goes first. At the start, choose who will play the whites. Okay. So one of the things is you can spin a piece to see who it points to. Also, a fun way to do it is rock, paper, scissors. Okay. Whoever wins that then becomes white, and then it's their turn because white starts first. How to capture. Land on a square occupied by one of the other pieces. Okay. Let's talk about our individual pieces and the way they move. And I'm going to get out of the way here. Excuse me, let me get out of the way here. Let's talk about importance. The king is the most important piece. Okay. Let's talk about movement. It can move one square at a time in any direction. And we can actually see that it only has one little square here. That's all that the king can move is one square. Okay. This also means that a king cannot capture another king, because if one moved, the other one can capture it. So kings don't fight each other. What is check? When the king is placed in jeopardy of being captured by the opposite side, that's called check. What to do when in check? The king must be moved out of check or the attacking piece blocked by another piece, okay? So basically, if you discover the other person says that you're in check, that must be the piece that you move. Any strategy you have must be put on hold, and you must either block or move your king out of check, okay? Or the game is over in the next person's move. It doesn't mean anything. You have lost. What is checkmate? The king is in check and cannot move a safe square, and the danger cannot be blocked or the checking piece captured, then it's game over. Okay? So the king gets captured, that's it, game over. Now, one of the things to tell that if it's a king is usually the pieces you'll see a little cross on top. I know there's many different little fun ones. There's even a Nintendo one with Mario and Bowser and stuff like that. But usually in our pieces, our typical pieces, there's a little cross on top, and that shows it's the king. All right, let's talk about our rook, okay? We'll talk about the placement on the board in a little bit too. So movement can move one or multiple squares in a straight line in any direction, like a cross, okay? So it can move in one move up, down, left, or right, okay? How many? 2 rooks per side for a total of 4 on the board, okay? By the way, there's only one king, of course. Placement, it occupies the 4 corners of the board. That's our rook. Someone may call that the castle. Ooh, the knight. Movement. The knight has the most complicated move. It's an L, okay? So if we look at our pieces here, easy thing to do, there's 2 ways of doing it. I usually go the two spaces and then left or right. That's kind of like an L. So 2 spaces left to right, 2 spaces left to right, 2 spaces left to right, okay? Now another way that you can view that is you have the 1 space and then 2, okay? So whichever it is that you want to do, 1 space and then 2 left to right, 1 space, 2 left to right, 1 space, 2 left to right, okay? So it has a complicated, it's kind of odd way it moves. It can move one square straight and 1 square diagonal, any direction, okay? Only piece which can move around another piece, okay? So they call this kind of the jumper or the sniper. There's some folks that what they'll do is they'll basically make a blockade, and then when the other player doesn't realize it, the king jumps over their own pieces and the other pieces, and then it attacks very quickly and snipishly another piece, okay? How many? There are 2 knights per side, 4 knights per chess set, okay? Placement. The king occupies, the knight occupies the square right next to the rook on the back row, okay? So we're kind of moving in, aren't we? So we have our rook here, we have our knight here, okay? The bishop, the guy with the funny hat, okay? Our movement can move 1 or multiple squares in a diagonal or a diagonal way, okay? Just like that, okay? Diagonal, like an X. How many? Bishops also number 2 per side. And that means that there's 4 total, okay, on the board. Placement, they are located right next to the knight in the back row. So we have rook, we have knight, and we have bishop, okay? So rook, knight, bishop. These are the only pieces which occupy only 1 color square during the entire game. So it's kind of unique because they can't really jump to a different colored square. The queen, the most powerful piece on the board. Okay, the queen is kind of like a rook and a bishop all in one. Movement. She can move on. It can move one or multiple squares, straight or diagonal. Okay, so up, down, left, right, cross, like an X as well. So she is the most powerful moving piece on the board. Okay. How many? Each player only has one. Okay. The queen is located to the right of the king at the beginning of the game. Okay. So we have our rook, our knight, our bishop, our king will go here, and then our queen is right here. Okay. Let's talk about our pawn and something magical that a pawn can do. Okay. It's the weakest piece. Okay. The only way that a pawn can capture a piece is if it's here, one diagonal over, and then it can capture it. Yes, it means that the pawn can move to a different row. Okay. But it cannot capture a piece that's in front of it. Okay. Now it can only capture diagonal. Now, one of the things that can happen is it actually creates a blockade. It can only move forward one square at a time, but in its first initial move, it can actually move 2 squares. Okay, so if it's here, 1, and most of the people make it do 2. Okay, we're going to have a video of a gentleman's going to talk to us about en passant and kind of fully explain it to us too. It cannot move backwards. Okay. Other pieces we talked about can move backwards. Captures only diagonal. So one of the things the pawn does is, just like I said, it'll actually start creating blockades. So they talk about pawns as being one of the lowest, but it takes a few pawns to create a blockade. But remember, a knight can jump over any other piece. Okay. So the knight can kind of break through a blockade, try to move around the blockade. But if you put pawns, you put pawn to pawn, then that really is like making a wall on the board. There are 8 pawns on each side. Placement, entire second row of the board is occupied by pawns. Now let's talk about what is pawn promotion. Okay, someone got a job somewhere. Oh, now they were working somewhere. They were intern. Now they're being promoted, and now they have a higher ranking job. So pawn promotion. Advance a pawn to the opponent's last row, meaning if a pawn can move, let's say these 2 here, move here, 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 and then here, that's when pawn promotion can happen. It can be promoted to a piece of any rank except a king. Above it, including the queen. So most people choose a queen. So can you have more than one queen? Yes, you can. You can have up to 9 queens, and there are some I'll say puzzle chess things that will actually have 9 queens, or there's just an interesting way to play the game where it's like 9 queens against 9 queens and only the king. Even if you already have one on the board, you can have more queens. So you can technically make it a rook or a knight if you wanted to, but most people, they choose a queen. And that's what pawn promotion is. All right, so let's talk about setting up our board. Okay. A big one to kind of know, let's look at our icons here. So first we have our king that has the little cross on the top. Our queen has a big crown. Well, this is supposed to be a crown too, but it's like a pointed crown. Here's our rook. Looks kind of like the castle. Here's our bishop here with the round hat. There's our knight riding their noble steed, I guess you could say. And here's our pawn, kind of our smaller piece right here. Okay, so what we have going on is that we actually, one big thing to do is to always make sure that the light square is on the right, or you can make sure that there's a dark square on the left, okay? Whichever one you prefer. You'll actually see movies and TV shows and all that, and they'll have actually set up the board properly with the pieces, and then all of a sudden it's been turned wrong so that the light is here or the dark is here. Also, one of the things is a lot of the boards we'll look at will have the numbers, which we'll talk about that in just a minute. But make sure that the light piece is on the right. So light on the right. Okay, so light on the right. And that's how we set up our board. Another thing is that, let's look at our main pieces here and just kind of mirror their real life characters here. So we have our rooks, we have our knights, we have our bishops, and then what did we say? The queen is always, the queen and the king, they kind of mirror each other here. Okay, so we have our queen on our left, on white, and then if we go to the other side, the queen, and if we actually had turned the board, that means that the queen is on the right of the king. Okay, so they mirror each other. That's the important part. Okay, so white, the queen is on the left, and it should mirror to the other queen and king on the black. Okay. All right, so first we're going to talk about en passant, and then I'm going to play a little video where a chess master is going to explain en passant to us. And I will be pausing the video, so pay attention and maybe shout out at home. Maybe I can hear you. Shout out at home about what you think the answer is. En passant is a special pawn capture which can occur immediately after a pawn moves a pawn 2 spaces forward from its starting position. Okay, and an enemy pawn could have captured it. Had it moved only 1 square forward, the opponent captures the just moved pawn as if taking it as it passes through the first square. Now, I'll tell you this, everything we've learned makes a lot of sense, okay? We've learned about the pieces, how they kind of work with each other. En passant and castling, I think, are special rules, and it's almost one of those things that we need to go ahead and get it out of the way, need to learn how to do that, and then, except for the strategies and all that, you're basically ready to play chess, okay? The resulting position is the same as if the pawn had moved only 1 square forward and the enemy had captured normally. Let's look at our sheet here. The en passant capture must be done on the very next turn, or the right to do so is lost. Such a move is the only occasion in chess in which a piece captures but does not move to the square of the captured piece. Okay? So watch this. It's going forward. He jumps here. He could have captured here. And then boom, goes there. Okay? Oh, so let's talk about en passant. And we pull up our video.
Hello.
Okay, like I said, I'm going to play the video and then I'm going to turn my thing down low. Here we go.
Future chess players, this is International Master David Preuss for Chess.com, and today I will be teaching you one of the exception rules in chess, which is capturing en passant. And en passant is français for in passing. And it is the one capture in chess where your piece does not end up on the square of the piece it captured. Usually in chess, if you were going to capture a piece, you would pick up a piece of yours that was going to do the capture. You would pick up a piece of the opponent's that you were going to capture, and then you would put your piece down where that piece had been. And that's how all captures work, basically, is just you walk onto the square where the other piece was, and then you remove it. But en passant is the one exception to that, and it is a special move where the other person's pawn moves 2 spaces, like this, and then you capture their pawn with the pawn next to it as if they had only moved 1 square. So it looks like this. Now, let me take you back in chess history a little bit and explain to you where this move comes from to help you remember it. And then we'll just go over it a couple more times. So chess used to have a rule that pawns could move 1 space at a time. Now they can move 2 spaces if they are on the 2nd rank or the 7th rank, right? So it used to be pawns could move 1 step at a time. And so what you would see is you would see the pawns moving like this slowly towards each other. And then finally they'd come into contact. And now these 2 pawns, either one could capture the other and the battle starts. Well, at some point, people's attention spans really decreased. And they decided that they couldn't wait this long to start the battle, right? So they added the rule that pawns could move 2 steps at a time. But a very, very important thing about pawns is whether they're passed pawns or not passed pawns. So it's a very important question whether this pawn here could walk all the way down to the board and become a queen with this pawn never being able to capture it. That's a very, very important question if you have any way to get past this pawn. So theoretically, you shouldn't have any way to get past it. See, no matter how I move the white or black pawns, at some point there comes a move where they could capture each other, right? If I move them 2 steps at a time, there still comes a point where they could capture each other. So these are not passed pawns. They're pawns which still have an opposing pawn that could get them. So that brings us to this guy over here. Is he a passed pawn? No, there is a pawn on the neighboring file, and he should not be able to walk all the way down the board and become a queen without this pawn having the chance to capture him on his trip. But let's say he makes this move. How's this pawn supposed to capture him, right? Legally, this pawn's only supposed to capture on these 2 squares. So did this guy just run right past him? So they decided that that would mess up the way chess played too much. So instead of allowing the pawn to run past like that, they decided to create an extra rule, which is to capture in passing. So when a pawn passes you by, you can capture it by moving as if it had only gone 1 step. Now, this option is only available for 1 move. You don't have the option to capture on a3 for the rest of the game. You can't like move your king and their pawn keeps going and you're doing something with your king attacking this pawn and they come here and suddenly you realize that this pawn is going to become a queen, so you move your pawn to a3 and say, I capture your pawn in passing. Absolutely not. You can't even do that if their pawn remains on a4 and they now move their king. You can't suddenly realize, wait, I should capture their pawn. It's a one-time option, okay? So it's just saying the pawn can't go past you without you having the right to capture it for a moment, but if you won't take that right, if you won't exercise it, it's taken away from you, like so many other rights. So the pawn, if it goes past you, you've got a 1-move window in which you can capture it behind like this. All right, so now let me ask you a question. Let's say this pawn here and this pawn. Can this pawn capture that pawn en passant by going to the d4 square, yes or no? The answer is no. This pawn here is not a pawn that has just moved 2 spaces, right? In fact, all captures en passant must occur with a pawn that has just gone from the 2nd rank to the 4th rank, right? And the pawn that captures it has to be on the 5th rank and then take it, okay? So how about this? Black plays this move. Can white capture this pawn en passant?
All right, what you think? Yes or no?
If you answered yes, you now understand how to capture en passant, and I'm very happy for you. Okay, so one more quick question just to check on your full understanding. So black has a pawn on c4, and now white moves their pawn from d3 to d4. Is black allowed to capture that pawn en passant because the pawn is on the right rank and the white pawn is now on the right rank as well. Can black capture it like this?
What you think?
The answer is no, because this pawn has only moved one step. En passant is only when that pawn rushes past you by moving 2 steps, not when it moves 1. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you around on chess.com.
All right, that's great. So hopefully you know a little bit more about en passant and understanding it. So let's go ahead and let's talk about our next special rule. Remember, there's really only 2. So once you learn this and the other, then you are ready for a chess game, okay? One of the things is I feel like somebody playing new, especially someone trying to teach them, and then instead of explaining the en passant pretty quickly, they're still trying to grasp how the pieces move and everything. But just realize that you may or may not have that issue, but it may pop up where you're playing someone that go, oh, en passant, and then they capture your piece and you go, oh no, what happened? And there you go. So we do need to know these rules. So let's talk about our second special rule, castling. Castling can only occur if there are no pieces standing between the king and the rook. Neither king nor the rook to be castled with may have moved from its original position. There can be no opposing pieces that could possibly capture the king in this original square. The square he moves through, or the square that he ends the turn. Okay, so here's our little graphic here. The king moves 2 squares towards the rook he intends to castle with. This must be either rook, okay? The rook then moves to the square through which the king passes, okay? So we basically have, if we're going to castle here on the right side, so basically as long as there's nothing here, there's no knight, and there's no bishop and there's no knight here, then in one move the king can jump 2 spaces and the rook could actually move here, okay? And then we have this, okay? On the left side, remember it's 3 spaces here, so 3 things must not be there anymore. It's a little more complicated on the left side. It moves to here and then the rook comes here. One of the things people want to do this for, why people want to do this, is that it does move your king into a different line. So maybe it would be, a lot of the strategies get mixed up then. I'll say that. It moves it moves it into a different frame of danger, but it's not the usual frame of danger, I guess you'd say. Okay, so let's talk about castling.
Hey everybody, International Master David Preuss here for chess.com, and today we're just going to go over a really important special move in chess. There aren't too many of these. There is en passant, which is a special way to capture with pawns. Another video covers that. And there is castling, which is really a very, very valuable move. So good to know, which is a way that you can sort of reverse the position of your king and your rook. So castling is useful because usually your king will be in some danger in the center of the board and your rooks will be somewhat useless outside of the center of the board. So you'll want to sort of reverse that situation. You're allowed to make this move only if there's no piece in between your king and rook. And you can do it towards the king side or towards the queen side. Now, the basic rule for castling is you move your king 2 steps towards the rook and put the rook on the other side of your king. So, for example, we would move this king to g1, and then the rook jumps to f1. Or, if we do it in the other direction, again, you move 2 spaces, even though you won't end up at the same spot, and the rook hops to the other side of the king. Always the rook ends up next to your king. Okay, so black will also castle queenside, moves his king 2 steps, and the rook comes to the other side of his king. Okay, so that's the basic rule of castling. That's what it looks like when you castle. Now, there are a couple side rules to realize. In addition to not having anything in between your king and rook, you need to not violate certain rules about check, which is when your king is attacked, okay? So let's say that black played this checking move with the queen. White is not allowed to castle when their king is in check. So this is not a legal way to escape from check, to move your king 2 spaces to g1. You would now have to move your king to avoid this check. Okay? Now, second rule about castling. You cannot castle through check. So since black controls the f1 square, white is not allowed to castle kingside here, though he could castle queenside. And the final rule is that you can't castle onto a square where you would be in check. So here the black queen has moved, so she's covering c1. That means white cannot castle queenside. That would be illegal to put your king in check. Okay, so 3 rules for when you cannot castle. You can't castle when you are in check. You can't castle through check. And you can't castle into check. Okay? And, sorry, but there's more. You are not allowed to castle if you have already moved your king or your rook. So remember when black checked the white king, this would actually, in this case, since white can't block or capture the queen, this would prevent white from ever castling. Because now the white king has moved, so he's no longer allowed to castle. So black checks the white king again, the white king moves, and now black castles to get their rooks into the game. Now, is white allowed to castle either side? The answer is no, because the king has already moved. All right. Now, here's another example. Let's go back to the beginning here. I'll play h3 for white. Black plays queen takes b2, attacking this rook, and I move the rook to save it. Now, black castles. Am I allowed to castle kingside now, even though I've moved this rook? I can, because this is not the rook that I'm castling with, so I can castle kingside. But let's say instead of castling, black had retreated his queen, and I moved my rook back here, and now black castled. Would I be allowed to castle queenside? Absolutely not, because this rook has moved. Okay, so I can't castle queenside, but I can castle kingside. But one restriction which does not apply, just to be clear, is this. If black plays this move, attacking the rook, is white allowed to castle queenside? This is from my starting position. So the king hasn't moved, the king is not in check, the rook hasn't moved, the rook is attacked. The answer is I can castle queenside, see, because I never put my king on a square that was attacked by the black queen. So it is legal to castle when your rook is attacked, but not once you've moved your rook. And those are the rules for castling. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you around on chess.com.
All right. So hopefully that explained castling a little bit better. Okay. I encourage you, maybe not in the, if you're first trying to play, maybe you don't have to do that in the first few games, but probably about your 5th game or so, you should definitely try to do castling, or maybe even if you have 2 people trying to learn together, both say or agree before you start, go, okay, so let's try to do castling so we kind of get the hang of it. So in class, usually after they perform the first game or 2, I'll encourage them to go, hey, okay, let's see some castling going on here so that we can actually learn how to do castling. All right, so our next part here, we're not going to delve into it too much. Mainly, you may have noticed, and it mostly so that we can play our little bit of our move in one game. Okay, checkmate in one. And then after we do that, we'll jump into our strategy part. Like I said, if you wanted to, you've actually learned enough right now just to go ahead and stop the video and play a game of chess if you wanted to. And then we'll come back, and it's kind of like doing part 2, of the video to learn a little bit more. Okay, well, don't stop it now. Let's do our checkmate in one game, and then after that, then play a game. How about that? Then come back for more strategy. All right, so our algebraic notation. Okay, the biggest things about that is this is kind of a standard among all chess organizations, most books, magazines, newspapers. And if you ever did want to relive one of the, the great chess games or anything like that, you could actually go in, pull it up, and they've actually written down all their moves and everything. Remember, this is not no game of chance. It's just the two players choosing what moves they want. The easiest thing to really know about this is, and I'll kind of jump ahead here, is that here's our symbols, of course. Here's our pieces. So in our algebraic notation, K is for the king, okay? Q is for queen. Now the K's already been taken. So what's the next letter in the knight? It's the N, so it's N, okay? B is for bishop and R is for rook, okay? Just kind of remember that N is for knight. So maybe if you think about the normal way to say knight, it'll work out for you. Now the pawn actually does not have a letter. All you do is you actually tell the algebraic notation of where the piece needs to move, and everyone assumes that because you didn't say if it was a knight, queen, king, or bishop, or rook, then it's a pawn, okay? So let's go ahead and let's jump over a little bit. We won't get into some of the more advanced parts of this. Mainly, I just wanted you to know about the rank and file. Now, so file and rank, kind of think about them as, if you ever use Excel, I'll use them to talk about columns and rows. So we have columns and we have our rows, which is kind of like our file and our rank, okay? So if we have an example here, here's one that's castling, okay? Or excuse me, about to capture our king here. So it says our rook. And then we have our move with our bishop here, okay? A big thing is plus plus means a checkmate, okay? This is kind of what a sheet looks like. Like I said, we're not going to get into that too much. Mostly that's for someone that really wants to get into a tournament. All right, so let's go ahead and let's talk about, I'm going to come back to the strategies. Let's go ahead and do our little game. All right, so let's do our checkmate in one, okay? So checkmate in one. Now, what I usually do in class is I have a really big chess board that I have on the floor, and then I'll call each one of the students to come up and volunteer. And each one we just kind of let another student come and volunteer to kind of mirror the images on the screen and then try to figure out how to do this. Now, we are the white. It is our move, and we're about to capture, we're trying to capture the king. So what could be a move in one move? So one move, the game is over. All right, so let's kind of look at it here. So I'll kind of go over it if you want to pause the video and then try to figure it out more for yourself. That's a good thing to do. But I'll just kind of talk through it. So usually I'll talk through with students about what each piece is, what each piece's move is, and kind of what the options are. Okay. Okay, so let's see here. So if we have, let's talk about our pawn to begin with. So our pawn could move to this space, okay? Does that threaten the black king in any way? No, it doesn't, does it? What about our rook here? What if our rook went all the way up here, or maybe even the rook here? What could happen if the rook went here? Oh, well, the rook could actually get captured by the king, couldn't it? Yeah, it actually could in the next move, so that's no good. What if the rook went all the way here? Would that mean that the king is in danger? Yes, the king could capture him in the next move. Okay, so that wouldn't work. What about if we move our bishop around? So sometimes in chess, the big thing is moving one piece and then thinking about the placement of the other pieces, not just the power of that one piece, okay? So if we take our bishop, let's see, where should we move our bishop? If we move it here, could it be captured in the next move? Yeah, it could technically. No, I mean it couldn't technically if it lands right here. So if our bishop's here, the next move, I could actually capture the king, couldn't I? But the king could move here. No, the king can't move there, can he? Because the rook is in the way. The rook would come up and get him. Now, remember, our chess piece, the king cannot put himself in check, okay? So if the piece or danger, the king goes here, he can't move here, he can't move here, my piece is not in jeopardy, and that's it. It's game over. Checkmate. And our answer is bishop to f6, and hashtag means checkmate. Okay, so bishop to f6. So f6, and letter always goes first. All right, so part 2. Now let's look at all our pieces here and kind of think about what our pieces do. Remember, we are the white trying to capture the black. Now, can the white move into to try to capture the king? No, because the king can't do that, because two kings can't capture each other, because the king cannot move to put himself in check. Okay, so these kings are just kind of hanging out. Let's see. What about our rook? Okay, our rook could go all the way up here and capture this bishop, yes. But then what would happen in the next move? Well, the black king could actually capture the white rook, couldn't it? So that doesn't work. Let's see. What about... what can our bishop do here? What if our bishop moves here? No, that's blocked. What if the bishop moves here? And maybe in the next... No, that doesn't really do anything. So let's see. What about our piece here? Well, this guy can actually capture the rook here. That's fine. Okay. So the pawn to the rook. Okay. Or the pawn can move here. Okay. Either one, here or here. Probably want to capture though. Now let's see what would happen to the board if that happens. So if the pawn was here, that means this piece is not blocked anymore. Now the bishop could go all the way and capture the king. So now the king is in check. So my move to capture the rook actually puts the king in check because of the bishop. Okay. So C, B4. Okay. Now in check. All right, so let's talk about this one here. So we have problem number 3. We're still the white, trying to put the black king in check. Let's see. Or, you know, we're not putting him in check, we're putting him in, you're about to get captured. That's right. Next move, capture. So checkmate is what we're looking for. All right, so let's look at our pieces. Let's just kind of go through our pieces here. So could this pawn's has already moved once, so it can only move one. That wouldn't do it. What about this pawn? These pawns here can all move 2. What if I go here? No, it's going to get captured. That doesn't do anything. Let's see. What about this pawn here? Can it move 2? Yeah. Let's see. No, that wouldn't help anything. What about here? No, not really. What about the bishop here? Let's see. So the bishop moved. Could it? No, because the bishop has to stay on the dark square. So that wouldn't work. And if it moved here, it could be captured. Okay. So move there. No, that wouldn't work. Let's see. What about our rook here? Our rook could go all the way up and capture the knight. Okay, and then the next move, the king could capture him, so that won't work. Let's see. Now, what about this pawn here? If I moved here, that means it could be captured. No, it doesn't really work. What about the knight? So 2 left or right? 2 left or right? No. What about our queen here? So let's see. So what if the queen captured this pawn? Well, it could be captured by the other pawns here, so that won't work. What if the queen, let's see, captured the rook? Is the queen in danger? The queen is not in danger. So the only place the king can move was to the right. Okay, can't move this way. And if it moves this way, it doesn't matter because our queen can move that way too. So that officially puts the king in checkmate. Boom, there you go. Queen to G8. Okay, G8. All right, let's just do 2 more. Then we'll start talking about our strategies, and I got a few strategy videos, okay? Talking about starting and also finishing as well. All right, so let's look at our pieces here. Remember, we are the white trying to capture the black. So let's see, what can our king do? What if our king moved here? Would it be in danger? No. But would it do anything? No. What about here? Yes, it'd be in danger. Can't move there. Let's see. If I move here, let's see. No. Let's see. What else? I don't know if I can do that. Okay, what about our rook here? What if the rook, let's see, shot here? No, that wouldn't work because then the king could capture it. What if it went here? Nope, king could capture it. King could capture it right here. That won't really do anything. Okay, well, I'm not really sure what I can do. Let's see. Oh, if I look up here, what can our pawn do? Well, our pawn can only move 1 space, can it? Oh. Well, look where the pawn is. The pawn is almost at the other side, isn't it? So if the pawn jumped there, what could it do? Well, it could actually do pawn promotion, and the black is actually trying to do the same thing. So, if we did move our pawn to this space, it would be promoted to queen, wouldn't it? So if it was queen, now we could choose a different one because this actually has 2 answers. What other piece could we choose? See if I can hear you. I think I hear you. Rook, yes. So we could choose rook as well. So right now, this rook has the black king closed in, but not in check. Okay. If this switches over to be a queen, then guess what? The king can't do anything. King can't move this way or this way. The king, it has been captured. That is it. Okay. And yes, we could have chosen to be a queen, or we could have chosen to be a rook. Okay. The same move would have done the same thing in this instance. All right, 1 left. All right, we're the white, and we're trying to capture the black king. Let's look at our pieces. What about our king? Could our king go move 1 forward? It could, but it'd be captured. What about the pawn? What can the pawn do? Pawn can't do anything, can it? Poor pawn. The only thing left is our bishop. Okay. Now, if we took our bishop and we moved it right about here, what would happen? Now the king is in danger, isn't it? That means the king is now in check. Now, that means the next move the king has to get out of check or it's checkmate. So where could the king move? Well, the king can't put himself in danger or in check. So the king that's here can't move here, and it can't move here, can it? Okay. That officially means that checkmate on the king. Boom. Bishop to c7. Okay. So right there. So sometimes in chess, it's not just the move of that one piece. Okay. It's actually what the other pieces are doing, just sitting there. I guess that's a good example of how to say that. Are they just sitting there? Yes. Well, maybe they are actually doing something. All right, so let's go back and see if I can do a jump here to make it a little bit easier. Now, you officially learned basically all you need to know to play a nice, friendly game of chess. And the rest of the time now, we're going to talk about our different strategies. Okay. Okay, and I have to, let's see. And I have okay, so let me click back real quick. I think that shows, no, it's not what I want. Let's see, I want there it is. Okay, so, there it's wrong. Okay, so let's talk about stages in the game of chess. And I have a few videos, and also Magnus, one of the younger great players that we have, will actually finish off our class talking about his top 5 things he thinks a new chess player should know. Okay, did you know that Magnus was going to come tell us some tips? You never know what might happen. There are 3 distinct stages to the game of chess that you need to know in order to be a winning chess player. These 3 stages are opening, middle, and end game. Each stage has different goals and objectives. Opening stage to opening, you want to get a rapid development of your primary pieces. You also want to safeguard your king, generally by castling. It is in this phase of the game that you want to try to achieve dominance over the middle 4 squares of the board. Generally, the opening lasts between 10 to 20 moves roughly. The middle stage, the middle game, is when you begin to coordinate your pieces, primary pieces, and attack your opponent's weak spots and open files. The goal is to win primary pieces from your opponent, or even to be able to checkmate your opponent. Of course, if possible. The middle game is approximately from the end of the opening phase until around movement 40. End stage. The end game is when you use your remaining primary pieces to take advantage of the weaknesses that you created in your opponent's defense during the middle game. The end game often concludes when one of the players is able to move a pawn to the other side of the board and thus turn that pawn in for a queen. This is then followed by a checkmate or a resignation. Strategy, not tactics, are what needs to be considered in the end game. Classical opening principles. The 4 main aspects of classical opening principles are centralization, quick development, early castling, knights before bishops. Centralization. The most important part in the chessboard is the center. Pieces placed in the center attack more squares than those positioned on the sides of the board. The knight placed in d4 can effectively attack 8 squares. There are, and I won't list all that, the same knight in h1 can only attack 2 squares. If you do not control or possess a fair share of the center, then it might be difficult to maneuver pieces from one side of the board to the other. Quick development. The second important part of classical opening principles is quick development. You might know that pawns are the lowest. The minor pieces such as bishops and knights are the next. The queen and the rooks are the major pieces in the chessboard. The ultimate superior is the king. Quick development. According to classical principles, developing minor pieces is considered important before developing major pieces such as rooks and queens. It should be ensured that pawn movements are restricted to the minimum. The knights can jump over other pieces in the board, and as such, pawn movement is not necessary for developing the knights. If you open up the pawns in front of the king and queen, then the two bishops are opened up, and so are the queen and the king. Okay? Castling is one of the special moves in chess where the king is allowed to move two squares in a single move. In addition, two pieces are moved in a single movement, the king and the rook. And I don't need to re-explain castling. Knights before bishops. Another part of the classical opening principle is to move the knights before the bishops. As already stated, the knights can be moved without waiting for the pawns to leave way, as they are capable of jumping over pieces lying in between the original square and the destination square of the knight. As such, it is suggested that knights are moved in the front before opening up the bishops. The 4 rules of castling. Castling is only permitted if all of the following conditions hold. So we've talked about castling. We've watched a video about castling. Now, there's all kinds of different checkmates, okay? Things like the scholarly mate. The moves might be played in a different order and a slight variation, but the basic idea is the same. The queen and bishop combine in a simple mating attack on f7 if the black is performing the mate. So there's lots of different checkmates. Let's talk about what a draw in chess is. The game ends in a draw if any of these conditions occur. The game is automatically a draw if the player to move is not in check but has no legal move. The situation is called a stalemate. An example of such a position is shown in the diagram on the right. The game is immediately draw when there are no possibilities of a checkmate on either side with any series of legal moves. This draw is often due to insufficient material, including the endgame. King against king, king against king and bishop, king against king and knight, king and bishop against king and bishop with both bishops are diagonal of the same color. The game ends in a draw if any of these conditions occur. Both players agree to draw after one player makes such an offer. The player having the move may claim a draw by declaring that one of the following conditions exists or by declaring an intention to make a move which will bring about one of these conditions. 5th move rule. There has been no capture pawn move in the last 50 moves by each player. Threefold repetition. The same board position has occurred 3 times with the same player to move, and all pieces have the same rights to move, including the right to castle or capture en passant. So basically, if the same things have been happening for a long time, like 50 moves, then a draw is a good idea. Exploiting weaknesses. Chess requires that we look for weaknesses in our opponent position while keeping ourselves out of weak positions. As always, the game remains a balance of attacking and defending. A weakness is simply a flaw in a position that we can exploit. These weaknesses can be anything from one line to poor piece placement to overworked pieces. Depending on what stage we are at in the game, we will see different weaknesses in our opponent. Okay, so talking about the king's safety and everything. Okay, so let's go ahead and we have a few videos to look at.
Now that you've learned how to move, to capture, to check, and checkmate, as well as do the special moves in chess like castling and en passant, it's time for you to feel what it's like in a real game. In a real game, nobody is there to tell you what to move. You have to think and decide, what is the right move? Should I move a piece? Or can I capture something? Should I castle? Or try to promote one of my pawns? This is where the thinking part of chess comes in, and you have to try and decide what your best move is. The only way to do this is by looking at the board and considering both your options and your opponent's possible plans, and then trying to decide which move improves your position the most. Sometimes the right move will jump right out at you. Rook h8, checkmate. At other times, you'll have absolutely no idea what the best move is. Let's see if you can find a good move in each of the following positions. Black is currently up 3 pawns, so Black decides to offer a trade of queens, thinking it will be easier to win the game without having to deal with White's queen. Black didn't consider what the queen was doing on the 8th rank. Can you find White's best move? The Black queen gave up protection of the back rank and forgot to ask what checks White has in the position. White only has 1 check, but it's checkmate. If you found Queen e8 checkmate, great job. This checkmate is known as a back rank checkmate. In this position, after Rook a1 check, it looks like Black is about to deliver a back rank checkmate. What is White to do? Well, if White decides to block with Rook e1, notice that doesn't help because after Rook takes e1, it's checkmate. Let's look a little closer. Can you find another White piece that can help us deal with the check? If you found the move Bishop takes a1, great job. The bishop moves all the way from the other side of the board to come to the rescue, capturing the checking piece. Remember, if you can capture a checking piece, this can often be the best way to get out of check. In this position, what do you think is White's best move? If you're thinking Rook a8 delivering a back rank checkmate, you have to remember, it's not just your moves you have to consider. We also have to figure out what is our opponent doing. In this position, White's best move is also White's only move because notice, White is in check. And in this position, White must deal with the check first and play King h1. Now Black has to be careful and deal with White's threat on the next turn. In this position, can you find White's best move? Notice that we can capture a pawn with Rook takes e4, but then Black is able to do the same thing with Knight takes a7. Remember, when you find a good move, always look for a better move. Don't forget about your pawn on a7. It's 1 move away from reaching the 8th rank. Do you remember what happens when a pawn reaches the other side of the board? That's right, the pawn gets a promotion. Notice the newly promoted queen puts the Black king into check and threatens the knight all at the same time. After king f7, queen takes c6 wins the knight. It takes time and practice to find the best move. Now it's your turn to continue practicing finding the best move.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Taxman and I'm with Chess NYC, and I'm going to talk to you today about the 3 principles to opening strategy. So, when we get to the game, we're always like, what do I do? There's so many pieces, I don't know how to start. Well, I'm going to give you 3 steps that are going to help you create a strong, confident opening. First thing that we need to understand is these 4 center squares. These are considered our super squares because this is where the center of the board is, the control center. For example, if I have my knight in the center of the board, my knight can control up to 8 different squares. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We can see that this is
So this is one of the things we talked about earlier, is trying to control the center of the board. Okay.
a very strong place for my knight. If I have my knight on the side of the board, it can only control up to 4 squares. 1, 2, 3, 4. Therefore, my knight is stronger in the center, whereas most pieces are stronger in the center of the board. So, at the beginning of the game, we want to think about center control. First thing we can do is try and get our pawns into the center. Very important to try and get our pawns to control the center. The next important step that we want to focus on is piece development. Now, I like to think about my pieces as they are working for me. I want to give my pieces a job. If they're sitting back here, they're not happy and they're not doing anything. So my next step is to bring my pieces out and have them working for me. Usually we bring up the knights before the bishops. So I can bring my knight to f3 and my other knight to c3, and then I'm bringing them towards the center. Notice how I did not bring my knight to h3. That would not be a good choice. Towards the center. Next, I want to bring my bishops out. Again, towards the center, controlling the center squares. The next step that we always want to consider is king safety. Very important. I like to consider the king like a baby. The reason I consider the king a baby is because we always want to protect our babies, just like we always want to protect our king. Therefore, the best way to protect our king in the beginning of the game is to castle. Now we have two ways that we can castle. We can either castle on the king side or on the queen side. Right away, I can see that I can castle on the king side. To castle, I move my king 2 spaces and then bring my rook to the other side. And now my king is stuck behind a little fortress, or to keep with the theme of a baby, a crib, and it is protected and safe. Just to review, the 3 important principles are controlling the center, piece development, and king safety. Those are the 3 things that we can do at the beginning of the game to go into the middle game confidently.
Chess can often be a long game with more than 100 moves played, but it can also be incredibly short if you want it to be. Many people want to know, what are the fastest checkmates? And we are going to show you, but keep in mind, none of these checkmates can be forced. These are only checkmates that you literally have to try to do on purpose because they can be otherwise defended very easily. Let's see the shortest possible checkmate on the board. White plays f3, not a great opening move, already exposing the king on the e1 to h4 diagonal. Black opens with e5. Notice the black queen is already looking at the weakened h4 square, ready to pay the white king a visit. White plays g4, further weakening the e1 to h4 diagonal, and the black queen pounces on the h4 square, delivering the fastest checkmate in chess. Notice that the white king cannot move, there's no way to block the check, and you can't capture the checking piece, so after 2 moves, the game is already over. In fact, it's time to start a new game. Let's see that idea again, but this time it'll be white delivering the checkmate. After e4, black plays f6, d4, g5. And can you spot the checkmate? That's right, queen h5, the fastest checkmate for white, is in 3 moves, and the fastest checkmate for black is in just 2 moves. Let's hope that you never find yourself on the wrong side of this checkmate. Now it's your turn to practice the fastest checkmates.
So I hope you enjoyed those videos. I have one last video and then we're going to wrap up class. This is actually Magnus, one of our best young players. And he's going to tell us the top 5 tips he has for beginners.
Hello again, chess.com community. Here are my 5 best tips for chess beginners. First of all, play as much chess as possible. Playing really is the best form of training. That's the way you develop your instincts, both positional and tactical. So any playing training is good. Longer games, blitz games against computers, against other humans. Secondly, reading, whether it's books or content on the internet, like videos, watching those. It helps a lot to read about chess just because you like it, just because you find it interesting, and in the long run it will be very helpful. Number 3, learn the basic mating techniques, like mating with a queen and a rook, or 2 rooks and queen against just the king, or also rook against the king. It's very useful to know. It gives you a lot of confidence to that you can finish the game off with a mate, because often especially in games with beginners, you can play very well, you can reach winning position with many pieces up, but it's sometimes hard to checkmate the opponent. And you see in games, even at the very top level, the mating techniques of 2 rooks against a king, and also the mating technique of king and rook against just a king. They are very useful in many endgames. Number 4, learn from the old masters. Throughout my career, I feel that it's been very useful, but most of all very interesting to read about how chess has developed over the years, and to look at the games, especially I think the games since the Capablanca Alekhine match in 1927. I think ever since then chess has been played at a very high level, and you can learn a lot from all of the great masters. Plus, of course, again, if you're as interested in chess as I am, you will find it very interesting just to read about it. And lastly, but most importantly, have fun. Chess training, practicing, it should be all about having fun. If you find playing long games, if you find playing quick games, if you find solving exercises, reading chess books, watching videos, if you find all of this very interesting and fun, you will come a long way.
Okay, awesome tips from Magnus. So, one of the things we're going to talk about here is, I know that in the handout, and I'll pull the handout up real quick. The handout we talked about, let me get rid of that. Talk about kind of everything we've covered here. It's kind of listed in the handout here, talking about setting up our board. Knowing the pieces, the moves that you can make, how the pieces move. So this is a great thing to have, just kind of close hand, especially someone that's a little bit of a beginner. Talking about checkmate, stalemate. We talked about en passant. We also talked about castling. And let's talk about some of our other basic strategies. Protecting our king. Don't give pieces away. Control the center of the board. Use all of your chess pieces. Your chess pieces will not do any good when they're sitting back on the first row. Try to develop all of your pieces so that you have more to use than your attack in the king. Using 1 or 2 pieces to attack will not work against any decent opponent. We talked about the rank and file. These are some great resources. Chess.com, of course, and this is a great free chess game for Windows or Mac as well. But Chess.com is a great resource. They have a great app. They have constantly little games and stuff. They have a free and a paid version. I've just used the free version. Constantly the games you can play online against random people. You can play online against the computer. with certain setups. So let's talk about one of the things is in class, and our goal is just to try to get people to, want to be in a chess tournament. It's not as serious. It's just kind of a fun tournament that we have at the library. Many chess tournaments follow a set of common rules, similar rules. These rules do not necessarily apply to play at home or online, but may want to practice anyway. Touch move. If a player touches one of their own pieces, they must move that piece as long as it is a legal move. If a player touches an opponent's piece, they must capture their piece. A player who wishes to touch a piece only to adjust it on the board must first announce the intention, usually by saying adjust. Now, these are like tournament rules like it says. Let's talk about clocks and timers. This is similar to the one that we use at the library with our little chess game. And if anybody says that a game of chess is boring, play a game of chess with a timer on it. It can get very exciting and extreme very quickly. Most tournaments use timers to regulate the time spent on each game, not on each move. Each player gets the same amount of time to use for the entire game and can decide how to spend that time. Once a player makes a move, then he or she touches a button on the button or hits a lever to start the opponent's clock. If a player runs out of time and the opponent calls the time, if a player runs out of time and the opponent calls the time, then the player who ran out of time loses the game, unless the opponent does not have enough pieces to checkmate, in which it can be a draw. Okay. All right, so let's go ahead, and I have one final video to watch, and then we'll round up class, and I'll tell you about some of our other upcoming classes.
Hello, this is David Sullivan from Chess NYC again. Today I'd like to talk to you about blitz chess and use of a chess clock. Most serious games of chess are timed, and actually that's a really good thing. I think a lot of people are under the impression that chess is an extremely slow game, when actually it often is an extremely fast game. One popular form of the game is called 5-minute blitz. On the clock face, each side says 5 minutes. There's a button that corresponds to each side of the clock. When one person moves, they move, and with the same hand that they touch the piece, they touch their side of the clock. When they touch their side of the clock, their own time stops and their opponent's time starts. Then their opponent makes a move and touches the clock. And you keep making moves and hitting the clock until either one side wins the game, there's a checkmate or a draw result, or somebody runs out of time on the clock. If you run out of time on the clock, you lose. My personal addiction is 1-minute blitz on the internet. In fact, a friend of mine calls that video chess crack, where you play, each side has 1 minute to make every move in the whole game, so that the entire game of chess will last less than 2 minutes. You're packing the whole thing into less than 2 minutes, and it produces a thrill which is unusual, and it's so addictive. That's why he calls it what I called it. It's the best game in the world.
Okay, so we have come to the end. Big things, just go ahead and just like he said, have fun. We've covered tournament style as well. So we covered our clocks and our tournaments. So if you did want to do one of those online, you'll be prepared and ready. Now, one of the things is using like the chess.com app. Do realize, of course, the computer knows all the rules and everything and where you can and cannot move. So it makes the game a little bit easier to maybe someone that's a beginner, but I don't want it to be that you play something and you go, well, I don't know why the pieces are moving, and because maybe you don't know all the rules and everything. So, but it's a good thing to play against someone else. So I encourage you to pull out the chessboard, play with friends or family, kind of as we're saying, safe and stuff, and try something new and encourage other people to play. All right, so we kind of talked about some of our other classes that we have upcoming the rest of the month. So the class that we have this afternoon is Advanced Photo Editing and Layers, which is one of our newer classes that's coming up. We've been doing the editing part, but the layers is a new part. We'll be talking about quick masks and the different layers and everything. Different projects we're going to be doing. We're going to be whitening teeth and changing the color so the whole picture is gray except for like one little thing on there. And we'll also get rid of blemishes. Kind of the idea that people say, hey, I want to Photoshop something. Kind of the terms that they talk about, but we'll be using the GIMP software that is a free Photoshop alternative. Okay. If you come to that class or watch the video even after it's been recorded, just realize I also will post in the I'll post in the chat the handout, of course, and also I'll also post the sample files that we're working with because they're stock photos and stuff. So you could actually work along with me. Okay, so that's the class for this week. Next week we'll be doing the cord cutting basics, and they'll also be doing photography printing and virtual scrapbooking as well, and then creating videos and editing basics. And on Thursday we're going to be doing Raspberry Pi projects with Alex. Yay, Raspberry Pi stuff. And then we'll be in the afternoon we'll be talking about library resources and apps, including using the new Libby audiobook and ebook app. Okay. Just a little side note, our libraries are open with limited service and hours. Of course, all our classes now are virtual. We're not doing any in-house classes right now. That's why I'm doing my classes virtually and stuff. Curbside holds pickup is available. You can go to gchrl.org for details, or you can call into the library Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel and help us with our goal. We're trying to get 100 YouTube subscribers so that we can have our own YouTube address, okay? If you're searching for our YouTube channel, the easiest thing to do is just search YouTube for GCHRL videos and it'll pop right up. Okay, well that does it for our class. Thank you for coming. And bye-bye for now. Hope to see you this afternoon for our photo editing class. It's going to be a lot of fun, I promise, and it's very, very exciting because it's the first time doing that class. The half of the class is brand new, so it's going to be great. All right, well, I'll see you guys later. Have a great day. Stay safe. It's sunny. Maybe go outside and get a little bit of exercise and stuff. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.